Hey time travelers, I'm Tony, and I'll be your guide as we continue our journey through the Romantic era. And speaking of Romanticism, don't you just love all of this nature, individualism, emotion, and imagination? I hope you enjoyed the warm ambiance created by the fireside poets. Even in tough times, they seem to find the bright side. Remember how at a low point in his life, Longfellow was able to write about peace on earth, goodwill to men? So much light. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it, because now you are about to enter the dark side of Romanticism. That's right. This week we meet the Dark Romantics. As German author Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once observed, there is strong shadow where there is much light. Dark Romantics embraced all of those romantic topics like nature, individualism, emotion, and imagination. But where other romantics found light and hope, the Dark Romantics tended to dwell in the shadows where nature's indifference and humankind's troubling thoughts and emotions reside. In today's video, you'll get an introduction to Dark Romanticism and learn a little about some authors considered dark romantics. We'll also talk about symbolism, because these dark romantics like their symbols. After the video, you'll be ready to begin your PDF activities and online practice questions. But for now, stick with me, and I'll teach you a little bit about the dark side of Romanticism. Let's begin by learning what dark romanticism is. Under the umbrella of Romanticism, we have the subgenre of dark romanticism. The thing that set the dark romantics apart is that they examined the troubling side of human emotions, like human fallibility, judgment, punishment, and guilt. They introduced into Romanticism the idea that no matter how well-intentioned people may be, they inevitably drifted towards sin and self-destruction. Honestly, there was quite a bit of darkness in the 19th century. You already know about slavery and how the Civil War put America in turmoil from 1861 to 1865, but other conflicts were going on too. America changed radically during the 19th century. The country began to transition from an agrarian society, where the economy is based on agriculture and farming, to an economy based on manufacturing and transportation. People were leaving farms and moving to cities, where they worked in factories. Many of them ended up working long hours in unsafe conditions for low wages. At the time, there were no laws against child labor, so many of those factory workers were children. And to top it all off, some people were still haunted by lingering shadows from the 17th century, like Puritanism with its witch trials, or King Philip's War, a conflict that left hundreds of colonists dead and thousands of Native Americans either dead or enslaved. So where other romantics saw light and hope and inspiration, the dark romantics found the shadows. With their writing, they brought attention to the not-so-good side of humanity. And maybe by doing that, they hope to raise awareness and affect change. So just who are these dark romantics? If you search for dark romantics, you'll find a couple of authors whose work we won't be exploring in this lesson. Let me explain why. If someone asked you who the darkest of dark romantics was, you'd have to answer Edgar Allan Poe. Orphaned at a young age, Poe struggled to find happiness throughout his life. His most famous poem, The Raven, expresses mourning and emotional distress. But Poe's short stories became so dark that they earned him the title the Father of Gothic Literature. So we'll dedicate our next lesson, Gothic Literature, completely to Poe. Sometimes enigmatic poet Emily Dickinson is classified as a dark romantic. Poems like I heard a fly buzz when I died, and because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me, are definitely dark. But is she a dark romantic? Many of her poems fall more in the genre of transcendentalism, and then some of her work could be considered more in the genre of realism. Like I said, she was enigmatic. We'll save her work for transcendentalism. So let's talk about two dark romantics whose work we will be studying this week. First, there's Nathaniel Hawthorne. He was born in 1804 in, wait for it, Salem, Massachusetts. Yes, the very same Salem that was ground zero for the witch trials of the late 17th century. Even though those trials and other Puritan atrocities like the persecution of Quakers and the habit of cruel and unusual punishment had occurred long before his lifetime, Nathaniel Hawthorne was a descendant of some really zealous Puritans who were culpable in many acts of cruelty. This past troubled Hawthorne, and it showed up in his work, like his haunting novel, The Scarlet Letter, and the story that you'll read this week, Young Goodman Brown. Young Goodman Brown begins one evening in Salem Village, where our protagonist sets out for a walk into the forest. His wife, Faith, stands at the door, pink ribbons in her hair, and begs him to stay. But Goodman Brown explains he must take this journey. Must he? Really? He ventures into the dark forest and is met by a traveler who carries a walking staff with a serpent on it. Okay, pink ribbons, dark forest, serpent. Believe me, these very specific images are no accident. Hawthorne's message and Goodman Brown's journey are very symbolic. But before we get into symbolism, let me introduce you to one more dark romantic, Herman Melville. Herman Melville was born in New York City in 1819. He was descended from Dutch and Scottish settlers, and his father was a somewhat successful merchant. That is, until a failed business venture left him in debt. When his father died unexpectedly, Melville and his siblings had to leave school and go to work to support the family. Melville had difficulty securing a job he enjoyed, so he decided to become a cabin boy on a merchant ship. This began a series of seafaring adventures that inspired and informed many of his writings. Although Melville is best remembered for his novel Moby Dick, the book didn't really get much critical acclaim until after his death. Melville also authored many poems and short stories, including one called Bartleby the Scrivener, which is set on Wall Street in New York. The story is narrated by a lawyer who employs a few scriveners, people who would copy contracts and other legal documents. Scriveners sat for long hours inside their office walls, engaged in what the narrator refers to as a worrisome and lethargic affair. Bartleby starts out doing great, but over time he develops a bit of a defiant edge, and as the story progresses, Bartleby becomes increasingly eccentric, and then, oh wait, no spoilers. You'll find out when you read it. Okay, let's talk about symbolism. Symbolism is a literary device that authors use to add layers of meaning to text. When an author uses an object or image as a symbol, that object or image is actually representative of some abstract concept. For example, doves are often used as a symbol of peace. So if you're reading a story of some huge conflict, and this dove appears, the author might be indicating that peace is coming. Well, there aren't any doves in the stories you'll read this week, but there is definitely a lot of symbolism. For example, what might it represent that the traveler who meets Goodman Brown in the forest carries a staff with a serpent on it? Sounds very reminiscent of the Garden of Eden. And what about the dark forest? And how might these symbols contrast with the meaning of those pink ribbons? This story is filled with symbolism. Even the characters' names are used symbolically. You'll notice symbolism in Melville's work as well. The walls we mentioned earlier are a good example. Think about what walls do. They protect or they divide. They block someone from being able to see, or they can imprison someone. As you read, think about what the walls might symbolize in Bartleby's story. Okay, You're officially ready to get started on your daily PDF activities and online practice questions. At the end of the week, you'll have your reflection questions, and you'll write to compare the 2 short stories you've read, so be thinking about those similarities and differences. You'll wrap up the lesson by refreshing those writing skills, and then you'll take your online assessment. But for now, as you sail back into the Romantic age once again, I just have one thing left to say. Welcome to the dark side of Romanticism. Hey, hey!